Natalie Hart, and you're listening to the Primatech Files.
Hey, Primatech peeps. Welcome back to the Primatech Files, a Southgate Media Group podcast dedicated to all things Heroes Prime and Heroes Reborn related things. I am Lilith. No Ricky today. Sorry, guys. It's just me and one of our many interviewees, Miss Natalie Hart. She is the casting director for Heroes, so we're going to get to know all about her.
Hi, guys.
Would you like to tell our audience a little bit about you?
Sure. I am a casting director based in Los Angeles, and I did the original Heroes as well as being lucky enough to do Heroes Reborn. I've worked with Tim on multiple projects. I do primarily television and have been for about 25 years, and I'm in business with my brother, Jason Lapadura, and the lovely Kendra Patterson, who was our assistant on Heroes and became a partner by the time we did Heroes Reborn.
Okay, very awesome. Now, for a lot of people who don't know the technical details behind TV, could you explain to our listeners what your job exactly entails?
Sure. What casting directors do is we help directors and producers and executives find the talent that ends up playing a role that's written by a writer. So we'll read a script. We'll have ideas in our heads of, ooh, this person would be great or that person would be great. Let's get them in and show the powers that be these choices. And then we also reach out to the agent community, and then they submit actors that they think would be right from the description we've given them of the role.
Okay. So how did you get into casting?
Well, it's kind of a funny thing. My brother was in casting in New York, doing theater and some television with a partner, and I was working in rock and roll and kind of killing myself. I was managing bands and traveling all over and doing what you do when you manage a band. And his assistant went away for a weekend and didn't show up on Monday. And he asked me if I could come in and help. And 25 years later, I'm still working with him.
That's awesome. Could you talk us through the casting process for Heroes and or Heroes Reborn? Was it quick? Was it down and dirty and painless? Or what was going on?
Well, it was. Which do you want me to talk about? Both or?
Yeah, we could start with Heroes Prime first, though.
Well, Heroes originally had a lot of characters, probably the biggest ensemble we had ever worked on. Originally, it was presented to us to do, I think it was 15 characters, but by the time it aired, it was cut down to 11. So HRG actually was just a guest star in the pilot, if you can believe it, even though we knew that it was a very important role, and we had to hire someone who was series regular caliber. So that was interesting. Plus, during that process, I mean, I don't find any of it painful because I love what I do. And Tim lets us be very creative because we had Tim Kring, the creator of the show. We took a lot of chances with him. For example, the character that Sendel played was originally written as a 65-year-old. It was supposed to be that character's father. But we came across Sendel and we thought he was such an interesting and wonderful actor that we brought him in and said to Tim, you know, we think this guy could be a TV star. We wanted to show him to you, and he fell in love with him and then changed the character up. So there was that. And then the Petrelli brothers were originally twins, but we quickly realized that it was going to be hard to get two guys who were as young as Tim had written them, to play somebody who could be a senator. And we knew that's where the character was going to go. So we then split it up, and finding Milo's character, Milo played Peter Petrelli, that it was hard because we needed a man who had enormous empathy. And I'm not saying that men aren't empathetic, but it just, a lot of guys in their late 20s don't necessarily know how to tap into that. But Milo did such a beautiful job from the moment we brought him in, and we just knew he was the guy. And then Heroes Reborn was really fun because there was a part of it because I had done it for 4 years already that I kind of knew what worked, what didn't, especially like with our Japanese characters. It was very specific. And when I met Kiki, I just knew, like right off. She looked like a manga drawing. I knew what was going to happen with that character. Plus, she had these amazing sword skills, and she spoke the language, and she also spoke English beautifully, and I knew that would be important eventually. And she had done some series in Japan, which was not always easy to find here. People who lived here, spoke English, had those skills, and looked like her. So, like, when I found her, it was like, boom, we knew it, you know. But then there's other characters, like the Carlos character. At first, we had aged him up, and then that wasn't quite working for us. And then Ryan came in, and Jason, Kendra, and I kind of fell in love with him, and then showed him to Tim, but Tim wasn't really ready to get his mind around that character being that young. So then we kept going. So it's an intricate process, and we have a lot of fun doing it with Danica Yarosh. I actually met her for Gatlin Green's character, Emily. And when she came in, I knew that there was this character who hadn't even been written, because she doesn't really come in until the second episode. But they kept calling this girl Snow White. And I kept saying, so tell me a little bit about Snow White. And they said, well, she's like this huntress, and she's got, her feet are really rooted to the earth. And but they hadn't really fleshed it out completely. But when I met her, I just was like, you don't have what I need for this role, but there's this other role I think you're going to be really right for. So I brought her in for Tim, and he agreed, luckily.
The intensity of Danica, yeah.
She's just was it. Like, I knew, she's this young girl, and she was telling me that she had been, was able to shoot guns and bow and arrows, but yet she was really a really good actress, and she already had some acting under her belt, and she's so beautiful. And there was just so much about her that felt, not that the Emily character isn't, but that was sort of more all-American girl. And she had like this kind of edge to her that I knew wasn't going to work for Emily, but I knew Snow White, or at least what I thought Snow White should be, she would fit the role.
That is like an amazing code name, by the way. Kind of bummed they didn't work it into the show.
I know, right? That's what I thought. I thought for sure they would keep it, but they didn't.
So, other than Danica, were there any actors on either Heroes or Heroes Reborn that you immediately felt right, that felt right for any role?
Well, Mossy. We knew when we met Mossy, it was like, look no further. He was so the character. He was so funny. He was so great. And Kiki, oddly, the two big Japanese characters, it's a smaller talent pool that gets representation out here. As a matter of fact, Kiki wasn't represented. I met her through somebody. I know a woman who's a Japanese translator for industrials and commercials, and she knew of her. And I said to her, because what was submitted to me, nobody had the look for me. So I just called her up and said, hey, have you met any interesting Japanese actors that might not have a rep yet? And she said, yes, I know this great gal. So she came in and just, blew me away. But, so those two for sure. Obviously, Judith Ciccone, I've known and I've championed her over the years, and I just knew she'd be a really great matchup with Zach, because she's a force of nature. She's tall like him. She's got like this just sort of thing about her that I kind of thought the chemistry would be really good. Those are the ones that I knew like right away. Robbie, we met a lot of kids that we really liked for that role. Once I met Robbie, though, I kind of knew that Tim would really respond to him, because there's this thing that my associate on Heroes, her name was Carrie Owen. We used to joke around that this actor or that actor was very Kringsville. And when we met Robbie, we were like, oh man, he's so Kringsville. Tim's going to really like him. And that is who he ultimately gravitated to.
Oh, very cool. Did you guys have time to do chemistry tests for the show, or was it just like, I like you, let's do it, let's get you up
No,
to Toronto?
we did some chemistry tests. We did chemistry tests with Zach and Judy, Judith Ciccone. We had a couple of other girls, and because there were many different, what I like to say, flavors for that role. Tim, I think even before Zach had shown interest in wanting to be part of the show, had come up with these sort of Guy Ritchie badasses in his mind, this couple that were going to get revenge. And then when Zach joined, he talked to Zach about it, and Zach said, yeah, great. But for me, as a casting director, well, what does that mean? Is that a straight up badass? And I just kind of felt like having a Brit would be fun, because also we like to open up the world of Heroes. We sort of we like to make it seem that it's possible that this evolution can happen anywhere. And although her character ultimately didn't have powers, I still thought it would be really cool to base her as an English woman, considering Guy Ritchie was the his type of characters was a prototype or an adjective that were used by Tim for me. So we had that, but we also had this gorgeous, beautiful woman, Rose Rollins, test for it, and another English woman as well. So it was all about the chemistry, though, and Judy just was really able to hold her own with Zach.
Because I mean, it seemed like Heroes Reborn happened really fast. Like, we got the announcement, and then we were just like, okay, we just literally started hearing all the news. Like, Ricky and I, like, when it was first started, we were like, oh my God, look at this girl, Kiki. Oh my God, did you see her YouTube channel? So we were just like,
yeah, right. Well, I think for you guys, it was fast. For us, we had a month and a half of preparation. But to be honest with you, it didn't really go into Full Tilt Boogie until maybe 3 weeks in. Like, we were sort of taking our time and meeting people, and then all of a sudden, boom, we had to get it all done. We also did screen tests for the Emily and Tommy roles as well. And also the Quentin came in. We did screen tests with them. See, what they do now a lot of the times as well, networks like to look at people on tape. So we would bring them in, and what people think of screen tests is chemistry, but it's not necessarily. It's sometimes you just bring in the actor doing the scenes. So we kind of did it with all of the main characters. Even Taylor, Eve Harlow, who oddly enough is from Canada, but I met her here. But when I told Stephanie Gorin, our Canadian casting lady, who, as I mentioned prior to this happening, did such an amazing job on the show. I mean, that she deserves such accolades. I cannot, sing her praises loud enough, because she did a great job. But she had already put Eve on tape for a different role. And when I looked at her, I just thought, man, she's so interesting and very Kringsville. And so we did a screen test with her so that Tim could see her live and in person.
You know what? You just inspired another. Now Ricky's gonna groan when he hears that. I think we're gonna have a podcast called Kringsville now, where we just kind of talk about all his TV shows.
Good. I can tell you who should be like the mayor. Should be the guy who played the puppet master.
We love David Lawrence.
I mean, come on. Who's better than David Lawrence? And his story is great. He didn't really have a legitimate agent either. I found him through a reel. Tim came up with that character, and 2 days later, I had to have it cast. And it was such a crazy description of what the role was. And I was like, I don't know people like that. So I just flooded out a breakdown, and I put it out on something that's called Actors Access, which is where people, I think they pay like a very nominal fee, like $10, but they can post their pictures, their resumes, and their reels and he submitted himself, and he came in and just won the role. He was amazing.
Yes.
He
We
should
love
be the
Dylan.
mayor of Kringsville, if you ask me.
We agree here at the Private Tech Files, very much so. Was there a character that was most difficult to cast on either Heroes or Heroes Reborn?
Well, as I sort of mentioned earlier, Peter Petrelli was difficult. I mean, Milo Ventimiglia came in. I had put him on American Dreams, and I knew his level of depth from that. He was really amazing. He sort of played on that show a guy who was going to turn into one of the radical weathermen for me. So I knew he had a lot of complication, but I also knew he had a lot of heart, just from, knowing him. And the empathy, I mean, that character was really the center of the show for me on a lot of levels, because I think it's closest to Tim Kring.
He said that, yeah.
He's really got a lot of empathy and heart, and so I think that might have made it a little difficult to cast, because I think it was a little bit of him, but also the way I think Tommy might have been him as a kid. But that's my own thing. I don't know if that's true or not.
No, we totally said that when we first met Tommy. We were like, God, this is such a Peter Petrelli vibe. And well, wouldn't you know it?
Totally. As a matter of fact, one of the kids we tested that Stephanie had found from Canada looked like a young Milo.
That would have given it away, though, huh?
But anyway, so that role was tough because of that, because of the empathy, and it's interesting. Guys in their mid to late 20s, they some of them can really tap into their emotions, but it's a difficult age for good looking guys. They're not quite sure how to handle all of that. But Milo just he did, and he did an amazing job as that character. But I would say that was the hardest on that. And Reborn, I don't know what was the hardest on Reborn. I think maybe it was Carlos, because it had to have a lot of different. It was, for me, I didn't quite know all of the places that Tim had wanted to go with it, and Peter and all the writers. So we kept bringing in guys that were definitely fit the military end of it, but not necessarily, again, the emotional end of it, or it went one way or the other, or it had all the emotion and not the tough. But, Ryan was a boxer. And so that was another side of him that didn't necessarily show in just performance, but he had in him. So yeah, I would say Carlos was a little bit difficult in Reborn. But Tim really had, Reborn was really clear for us when we sat down with him. And as I said, we sat down with him earlier than when we actually started casting. So it helped, because we were able to do a lot of pre-reading ahead of time before we started to show the producers and the director the acting choices.
So what was it like when you heard that Heroes was coming back?
Oh, well, I was thrilled. I'm as much of a Heroes geek as anyone, I can tell you. Like, I loved the show. I loved every moment of the show. Anytime I get like up on my soapbox when people start talking about, oh yeah, but season 2, and I'm like, yeah, but this is what happened in season 2, and this is what happened in season 3, and this is what happened in season 4, and this is what. So, for me, I was just so thrilled. I had hoped that day would happen.
So, who is your favorite character from each show?
Nobody said you were going to ask me that. All right. I obviously love Peter Petrelli. You can tell. I love that character. But I think my favorite character was Siler. Zach was not what you would think. On page, that character was much older. He was in his late 40s. But we love Zach, and we just thought we would give him a shot at it. And I knew that Tim was a fan of his because we brought him in on another show we had worked with Tim on, and he just brought so much to it. And the thing is, Siler was in the original script, but Siler was originally this priest vampire. It was gnarly. I mean, it was really intense, but it got cut. That got cut, and the other character that got cut was the role that Matthew John Armstrong played in the first season of Heroes, the guy with the radiation.
Oh, Ted.
Ted, thank you. Yes, Ted was such a heartfelt character, but originally his character was Middle Eastern, and I think everybody got worried about, the vampire priest and the Middle Eastern guy with the radiation hands. They just got a little scared, and they, made Tim take those characters out. But Tim eventually brought them back in, and which was great. So I kind of always knew that he would, because Siler was such an interesting character in the first script. So then when it came up and it was this older guy, I just thought Zach would be great. And then, of course, the rest is history. He was so amazing. And that character went on such an incredible journey, and he did, some of Tim's empathy is that he sees the both sides of everything, that I think that is what makes you empathetic, and the whole yin yang of everyone's personality. And I always felt that Siler would go to a really good side. And if you have ever met Zach Quinto, there is a really lovely, lovely person in him. And a dark and twisted person. So it was great that he got to do all of that.
What was really great was the writer's strike, because I don't think the fandom as a whole was really ready to let go of Siler. So the fact that it all just kind of worked out was kind of serendipitous.
I know, that's very true. Tim was going to let him out no matter what, though. He was, because he's that kind of guy. I feel bad. I'm not talking about Hayden. The cheerleader and Jack Coleman and, HRG. I mean, what about that? That chemistry also, But and in the new one, I mean, I love Robbie Kay. I love Tommy. I think Tommy's such a beautiful character. And I love the relationship with Kiki and Turu. They're such a great team, and it's amazing because that couple we didn't do a chemistry read with, but they just found that extra thing that goes on with actors that only actors can understand, I think. So I don't know. It's a toss up between Tommy and Miko and Ren.
We love Toru. When he was on the interview, he actually said he knew Kiki because, it's such a very small Japanese community in the LA. So I was just like, that's so cute. No wonder I ship it. I ship it so hard.
Yes, I know. Well, I got to also say Toru was another one. That was fun to cast because we didn't have like a lot to choose from, but, we saw people for a couple of weeks, and Toru just walked in with that hair, and he had on like these skater boy sock things. I can't even remember the outfit. It was wild, and he just won us over. He was so charming and endearing.
Yeah, I could see that. So, how did your relationship with Tim Kring develop?
Well, a lovely woman named Leanne Cornell, who is now a manager, introduced me to Tim. He was repped by her agency at the time, Endeavor. He was about to he had worked with NBC and had a holding deal with them. And he was doing a show called Crossing Jordan. And Leanne and I had a group thing, and she introduced me to Tim. And Tim and I just hit it off right away because I, too, am very empathetic and spiritual, and I'm a hippie at heart, as is Tim. And we just hit it off right away. And we worked with him for 8 years on Crossing Jordan before we did Heroes. So it was really nice because it helped us. I think it's what made the original Heroes and this ensemble so strong. You're allowed to take risks with with certain people, and when you have a long relationship with them, it's like what used to happen in the old Hollywood system. They just trust you. I told him when I introduced him to Kiki, I'm like, there is no one better. You just have to believe me, and he did. And I can tell you that is not the normal process in a pilot. In a pilot, you usually have to show, a lot of actors to everybody before they say yes to it. But Tim was like, yeah, I can see this, and he trusted me. So that's how we got to work with each other. And we did touch together the first year, and we just have a really nice relationship.
That's really cool. Tim is just like when we interviewed him, he was just like nothing like I expected. I totally got the empathetic vibe. Very sweet and soft spoken. I just couldn't believe it because it's Hollywood. You got to be tough, man.
No, that's not his nature. He's a good producer in the sense that he knows how to, surround himself with those tough people. And I'm sure you interviewed James Middleton.
Yep.
Poor James Middleton. He got trial by fire because he didn't get to do the first one. And Heroes is a it's a beast. And I can tell you, they went through a lot of production issues that are hair raising.
Yeah. Well, I won't take up too much more of your time. This interview was so fascinating. You've been so lucky.
Good.
We really appreciate it.
Absolutely. My pleasure. My pleasure.
Do you have any upcoming projects that you're at liberty to discuss?
Well, I'm about to finish a great show that I've been working on called Code Black, which is on CBS. I love that show. And I just put Megan Good and Boris Kodjoe and Odell Beckham Jr.'s on it. The episode that's right after the Super Bowl, actually. Bo Bridges and all these great people are on that show. And plus, it starts off with Marsha Gay Harden and Louis Guzman. It's a really great cast. And we're doing kind of a hush-hush project for Disney Channel. We do a lot of the musicals for them. That's my true love. I love working with young people because it's like discovering talent, which is nice. And, my fingers are crossed on a pilot that I met on. So we'll see what else. And I'm hoping for another incarnation of Heroes in the future. I think maybe in another couple of years, Tim will be sitting on a beach in Kauai or Mexico somewhere and come up with another fabulous story, and we'll get to do it again.
From your lips to Tim's ears.
Well, I'm hoping he's going to listen to this. So.
Well, do you have any social media you would like to plug? Instagram, Twitter?
Sure. I have LHP Casting is our Twitter site, and we also have a fantastic website that we invite everybody to look at and go to, because we do have a place there for people to submit themselves, and that is lapadurahartpatterson.com.
Awesome. We will totally put that in the show notes. So yeah, thank you for joining us so much. It's been wonderful. Well, that was my interview with Natalie Hart. I hope you found it entertaining and informative. And until next week, download the podcast,